Cleveland's streets echoed with the struggles of its residents, none more poignant than those of an elderly couple in their late 70s. Sitting hand in hand on their porch, worry etched across their faces, they were part of a startling statistic. 30% of Americans over 65 carry debt into retirement. Their story of financial hardship seemed destined for a bleak ending, until an unexpected twist of fate intervened. Enter Barron Trump, a name that would soon be linked to their lives in ways no one could have predicted. As their tale unfolds, prepare to question your assumptions about kindness, family, and the power of a single act to change lives forever. The world knew Barron Trump as the silent son, a towering figure who stood beside his father during pivotal moments in American history. Yet, for all his visibility, Barron remained an enigma, his thoughts and motivations hidden behind a veil of privacy. His presence was often overshadowed by the larger-than-life personalities of his family. In the marble halls of Trump Tower, Barron's footsteps echoed softly as he moved through his gilded world. The weight of expectation hung heavy on his shoulders, a constant reminder of the legacy he was born into. Outside, the bustle of New York City continued unabated, a world apart from the one Barron knew. It was on a quiet Tuesday morning that Barron's understanding of that world began to shift. As he scrolled through his phone, a headline caught his eye. Elderly couple faces eviction after lifetime of service. The story spoke of Leonard and Martha Johnson, a couple in their late 70s from Cleveland, Ohio, who had dedicated their lives to helping others but now found themselves on the brink of homelessness. The stark contrast between Barron's life of privilege and the Johnsons' struggle hit him like a physical blow. He felt a tightening in his chest as he read about Martha's arthritis-gnarled hands that had once tirelessly prepared meals for the homeless, and Leonard's failing eyesight that had forced him to give up his volunteer work at the local shelter. For days, Barron couldn't shake the image of the couple from his mind. He found himself staring out the window of his penthouse suite, watching the tiny figures of people far below, wondering how many of them were like the Johnsons, good people caught in impossible situations. As Barron learned more about the couple, a sense of purpose beyond his family name began to stir within him. He discovered that their debts had accumulated through a lifetime of putting others first. They had remortgaged their home to pay for a neighbor's cancer treatment and emptied their savings to keep the local soup kitchen running during hard times. Barron wrestled with doubts and fears. Would his actions be seen as a publicity stunt? Would he be opening himself up to the harsh glare of public scrutiny that had so often burned his family? But with each passing day, the urgency of the Johnson situation grew, and with it, Barron's resolve. In the end, it was a simple realization that pushed Barron to act. He had the power to make a difference, and with that power came responsibility. With trembling hands, he picked up his phone and began to make calls, setting in motion a plan that would change not only the Johnsons' lives, but his own as well. As Barron prepared to step out of the shadow of Trump Tower and into the light of his own making, he felt a mix of trepidation and excitement. He was about to venture into a world he had only observed from afar. The journey ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in his life, Barron felt the thrill of charting his own course. The bustling streets of Cleveland seemed a world away from Trump Tower as Barron Trump stepped onto the cracked pavement of East 9th Street. The air hung heavy with exhaust fumes and the quiet desperation of those struggling to make ends meet. Just blocks away, Leonard and Martha Johnson sat at their kitchen table, surrounded by unpaid bills. The couple, married for 50 years, found themselves trapped in a financial nightmare. Martha's arthritic hands trembled as she sorted through envelopes, each one a stark reminder of their mounting debt. Leonard gazed out the window, his cataract-clouded eyes filled with worry. "I never thought it would come to this, Martha," he whispered. "We worked hard all our lives. How did we end up here?" Martha reached across the table, her wrinkled hand covering his. "We did what we thought was right, Leonard. We can't regret that now." Their home, once filled with warmth and laughter, now felt suffocating. Faded photographs adorned the walls, bittersweet reminders of happier times and the sacrifices they had made for others. As the day wore on, the Johnsons navigated their new reality. Martha stretched their meager groceries, turning a single chicken into 3 meals. Leonard reluctantly canceled his heart medication refill, knowing they couldn't afford both his pills and the electricity bill. As night fell, Martha sat on the edge of their bed, clutching a stack of medical bills. Tears welled in her eyes as she remembered the day they had remortgaged their home to help their neighbor, a single mother of three diagnosed with cancer. "We couldn't just stand by," Martha whispered, the memory both comforting and painful. Leonard joined her, his arm around her frail shoulders. "We did the right thing, my love. We've always tried to do the right thing." But as they lay in bed that night, sleep eluding them, the true extent of their crisis loomed large. Their fixed income barely covered the basics, let alone the mountain of debt threatening to bury them. They had sought help, navigating a maze of bureaucratic red tape and societal indifference, only to find themselves back where they started, alone and afraid. The Johnson story was one of silent suffering, all too common in America's heartland. As they drifted into fitful sleep, neither could have imagined that their lives were about to change in ways they never thought possible. The morning air in Cleveland carried the scent of possibility and the weight of untold stories. As dawn broke over East 9th Street, two worlds were about to collide in an unexpected way. Barron Trump, the towering son of a controversial figure, stood out among the bustling crowds, an air of purpose surrounding him. Meanwhile, in a modest home on the outskirts of the city, Leonard and Martha Johnson stirred from their fitful sleep, unaware that their lives were teetering on the edge of a monumental change. The couple, their faces etched with the lines of a lifetime of service to others, moved through their morning routine with quiet resignation. Across town, journalist Sarah Connors hunched over her computer, the screen's glow illuminating her determined face. For weeks, she had been investigating the Johnson story, piecing together the puzzle of their struggle. Her investigation had led her through financial records, interviews with neighbors, and late-night stakeouts. Each new detail revealed the depth of their plight, their home transformed from a beacon of warmth to a prison of financial burden. As Sarah's article made its digital journey, it caught the eye of young Barron. The story opened a window into a world he had only glimpsed from afar. In the Johnson struggle, he saw a reflection of the nation's complexities and inequalities. Barron's world and the Johnsons were like two sides of a coin, one gleaming with privilege, the other tarnished by hardship. Yet both were bound by the same metal of humanity. This realization gnawed at Barron, challenging everything he thought he knew. He paced the plush carpets of his New York penthouse, his thoughts a maelstrom of conflicting emotions. With each passing hour, a sense of urgency grew within him. Barron began to see his position as a responsibility, a means to effect real change. But questions and fears swirled in his mind. How would his actions be seen? Would he be opening himself up to harsh scrutiny? As night fell over Cleveland, Barron made a decision that would alter multiple lives. With trembling hands, he reached for his phone and dialed Sarah Connors' number. "Miss Connors," Barron said, his voice steadier than he felt. "I read your article about the Johnsons. I want to help. Can you tell me more about their situation?" In that moment, as Sarah's shocked silence gave way to a flood of information, the wheels of change began to turn. Barron Trump, who had lived in the shadow of his family's legacy, took his first step into the light of his own making. The streets of Cleveland were quiet in the early morning light, a stark contrast to the tumultuous emotions churning within Barron Trump. As he stood on the corner of East 9th Street, his towering frame cast a long shadow across the sidewalk. The weight of his decision pressed down on him, heavier than any expectation his family name had ever placed upon his shoulders. Barron's mind raced with the information Sarah Connors had shared about Leonard and Martha Johnson. Their story was a narrative of love, sacrifice, and unimaginable loss. The Johnsons' journey into debt had begun years earlier, with a phone call that shattered their world. Their grandson, barely 5 years old, had been diagnosed with a rare and aggressive form of childhood cancer. Days blurred into weeks, then months, as the couple poured every resource they had into experiment. Treatments. Their savings account dwindled, then disappeared entirely. Credit cards maxed out, their home equity tapped dry. Martha's arthritis worsened as she spent countless nights sleeping in uncomfortable hospital chairs. Leonard's eyes, once sharp and full of mirth, grew dim with exhaustion and unshed tears. The medical bills mounted, a tower of paper that seemed to grow with each passing day. The Johnsons sold their car, then their cherished family heirlooms. Friends and neighbors rallied around them, organizing bake sales and car washes, but it was like trying to empty the ocean with a teaspoon. The debt continued to rise, threatening to drown them all. And then, on a crisp autumn morning, the battle ended. Their grandson slipped away quietly in the night. The silence that followed was deafening, a void that seemed to swallow everything in its path. Leonard and Martha were left standing in the rubble of their former lives, emotionally devastated and financially ruined. The aftermath was a blur of funeral arrangements and condolence cards. As the dust settled, the harsh reality of their situation came into sharp focus. The debts that had accumulated during their grandson's illness now loomed over them, a mountain they had no hope of conquering. Yet even in the depths of their grief and financial turmoil, Leonard and Martha's kindness remained undiminished. They volunteered at the local soup kitchen, finding solace in helping others who were struggling. They offered words of comfort to other families facing similar battles, their own pain giving them a unique ability to empathize and support. As Barron absorbed the full extent of the Johnsons' story, he felt something shift within him. This was about recognizing the profound resilience of the human spirit and the ripple effect of compassion. The Johnsons had given everything they had to save a life, and in doing so, they had inadvertently set in motion a chain of events that would change many lives, including Barron's own. Standing there on the streets of Cleveland, Barron Trump made a decision. He would do more than just pay off the Johnsons' debts. He would honor their sacrifice, their love, and their unbreakable spirit. But as he took his first steps towards making this vision a reality, Barron couldn't shake the feeling that he was stepping into uncharted territory. How would his actions be perceived? And more importantly, how would they change him? Barron Trump stood at the intersection of privilege and purpose, the bustling streets of Cleveland a distant blur. His towering frame, usually a silent observer, now pulsed with the energy of impending action. The Johnsons' story weighed heavily on him, their faces etched with worry and years of selfless giving haunting his thoughts. As he contemplated his next move, his father's words echoed, "True power isn't in what you keep, it's in what you give away." The gravity of his decision pressed upon him. This was about redefining his place in the world, not just writing a check. The potential scrutiny of his actions by the media made his palms sweat and heart race. Despite his reservations, Barron felt compelled to act. He reached out to Sarah Connors, the journalist who had brought the Johnson story to light, recognizing her insider knowledge as invaluable. As he delved into the logistics, Barron faced unexpected challenges. The intricacies of financial assistance, legal implications of debt repayment, and potential tax consequences emerged as formidable hurdles. Each obstacle became a crash course in real-world problem-solving. Seeking guidance, Barron arranged a meeting with a trusted mentor. Their questions forced him to dig deeper, to examine his motivations and the potential ripple effects of his actions. He left with a clearer vision and a renewed sense of purpose. The process of arranging the financial assistance became a delicate dance of discretion and determination. Barron worked tirelessly, setting up a series of anonymous donations through reputable charities to maintain privacy. As the pieces fell into place, a mix of excitement and trepidation washed over him. He stood on the precipice of a decision that would change not only the Johnsons' lives, but also his own path. This act of kindness had the potential to reshape his public image, challenging preconceptions about his family. In the quiet moments before executing his plan, Barron reflected on the unexpected journey that had led him here. He had entered the Johnson story as an observer, moved by their plight. Now he was poised to become an active participant, a silent guardian emerging from the shadows of privilege to make a tangible difference. With a deep breath, Barron set his plan in motion. As he watched the first steps unfold, he wondered how this moment of compassion would ripple out into the world, and more importantly, how it would change him. The envelope trembled in Martha Johnson's weathered hands, her arthritis-gnarled fingers struggling to break the seal. Leonard leaned in close, his fading eyesight straining to make out the official letterhead. The couple's tiny living room, cluttered with a lifetime of memories and unpaid bills, seemed to hold its breath as they unfolded the crisp paper within. The scent of old paper and ink filled the air as Martha's trembling fingers smoothed out the letter. Her eyes widened, tears welling up. "Leonard," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the ancient radiator. "Am I reading this right?" Leonard squinted, his face a map of confusion and disbelief. "It says our debts have been paid in full, every last cent." The words hung in the air, too enormous to process. For years, the Johnsons had been drowning in a sea of medical bills and mortgage payments, their modest pension barely keeping their heads above water. Now, in the span of a single sentence, that burden had vanished. Martha's hands began to shake uncontrollably, tears spilling down her weathered cheeks. "But how? Who would do such a thing?" Leonard wrapped an arm around his wife's shoulders, his own eyes glistening. "I don't know, my dear. It's like a miracle." As the reality sank in, a tidal wave of emotion crashed over the elderly couple. Years of stress and impossible choices melted away, replaced by hope. For the Johnsons, the identity of their savior mattered less than the profound change sweeping through their lives. Martha found herself imagining affording her arthritis medication without skipping meals. Leonard dared to dream about finally getting his cataract surgery. "We can breathe again," Martha said softly, squeezing her husband's hand. As news spread, neighbors started showing up with casseroles and offers of assistance. The local church group organized a celebration dinner, filling the Johnsons' home with laughter and warmth. The ripple effect extended to the community center where Martha used to volunteer, with whispers of hope beginning to circulate. Leonard and Martha grappled with expressing gratitude to their anonymous benefactor. They penned heartfelt letters to local newspapers and offered quiet prayers of thanks. As they settled into their newfound financial freedom, the Johnsons decided to pay it forward. They began setting aside a small portion of their pension each month for others in need. "We've been given a second chance," Leonard explained. "The least we can do is try to give others that same feeling of hope." The streets of Cleveland buzzed with speculation. What began as a local story of unexpected kindness had grown into a media frenzy, with reporters camped outside the Johnsons' home and neighbors peering through curtains. The air was thick with anticipation, as if the entire city waited for the truth to emerge. In the eye of this storm, Barron Trump sat alone in his hotel room, scrolling through articles filled with wild theories about the Johnsons' mysterious benefactor. As he read, a growing unease settled in his stomach. The truth was both simpler and more complex than imagined. Barron's act of kindness had snowballed into something uncontrollable. He thought back to first reading about the Johnsons, how their story pierced his privileged bubble. Now he wondered if he'd been naive to think he could change someone's life without changing his own. As the sun set over Cleveland, Barron made a decision. With trembling fingers, he dialed a number he'd memorized but never used. After 3 rings, a familiar voice answered. "Dad," Barron whispered, "I need your advice." The conversation that followed was unprecedented. Barron spoke as a young man grappling with his choices, explaining his impulse to help and the unexpected fallout. Donald Trump listened silently, his usual bravado replaced by thoughtful consideration. When Barron finished, the silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. "Son," Donald finally said, his voice gruff but not unkind, "sometimes the hardest thing is standing by your actions when the world is watching. But if you believe in what you've done, you have to own it, no matter what comes next." As Barron hung up, he felt a mix of relief and trepidation. His father's words echoed, mingling with the memory of the Johnsons' tear-stained faces. He understood his journey was just beginning. The next morning, Barron stepped into a sea of camera flashes. His face bore the determination of someone who had made a life-altering decision. As he approached the microphones, the crowd fell silent. "My name is Barron Trump," he began, his voice steady despite his nerves, "and I have a story to tell you about Leonard and Martha Johnson." As Barron Trump's act of kindness rippled through Cleveland, it transformed conversations and challenged perceptions. In coffee shops, people discussed privilege and compassion. For the Johnsons, life became surreal. The weight of debt lifted, allowing them to rediscover simple joys. One evening, Martha squeezed Leonard's hand, whispering, "We can finally breathe." Barron himself changed profoundly. Stepping into the spotlight, he revealed unexpected depth and discovered inner strength. As he navigated public scrutiny, he found purpose in advocating for those in need. This story reminds us that kindness can change lives in unforeseen ways. It challenges us to seek opportunities to make a difference. What small act of compassion could you perform today that might transform someone's world tomorrow?